Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Potts. This morning we're going to look at the question, the sacraments are the best way to feel close to God, using the 5-point plan. So first of all, we're going to start by looking at the key words. Obviously, sacrament is the key word here. And there's a few different definitions you could use of sacraments. You could use an outward sign of inward grace if that means something to you. I'm imagining for some of you it's something that your teachers taught you and we've taught it you, and then you've learned it, but you're not really 100% sure what it is. A sacrament is basically something Catholics do to get grace or God's blessing. Number 2, because the Catechism says to. Number 3, because JC did or said we had to. And because it's part of our culture. And based on your belief, you may be drawn to more than one of these aspects of the definition. So a sacrament is something like baptism, like Holy Communion, like the sacrament of the anointing of the sick, that Catholics actually do, which show a belief on the inside. And there's few different things that benefit you from that. So you receive grace, you feel a closeness to God, you become more part of your community. In the case of baptism, you actually join the religion. There are other reasons why we do those things, perhaps to feel part of our community, perhaps because in some cases it's expected of us. So for something like having a religious marriage, or if your parents get you baptised, it may be a tradition in the family rather than something that you personally believe. But then we also might do them because Jesus said that we should do them, or because the Catechism said that we should do them. So we've got our definitions. And if we reword the question, what it's basically asking us is, are there better ways to feel close to God? This is an absolute gift of a question, because it means you can start to bring in things from entirely across the course, which may seem to have no bearing on this specific question at first. But if it's about feeling close to God, all of the course is about the different methods and the different reasons why, and the different actions that we might take in order to feel close to God. So we need to look at the bullet points because this is important. So first of all, we're going to put the Catholic view, which is going to be mainly yes, sacraments are the best way to feel close to God. We need to put the Christian point of view. And in this case, the view that you're really looking at is something like the Quaker view. And they believe that any sacraments are kind of a distraction from the core business of focusing on God. And it's only by focusing on God and stripping away all the sort of distractions that you can develop a true relationship with him. And then we need the conclusion. So if we were to structure this and do a decent job of it, I guess you could do that as point 1, you could do that as point 2, and then you could do a nice big one for point 3. So let's start off by thinking of what quotations we know that we could throw in here and maybe use later. So for agree, we're looking for any quotations that have got something to do with the sacraments. Hopefully the first one that you're going to have in your brain is the one for the Eucharist, which is one that we speak to you about all the time. You could also talk about baptism. If you can't remember the door which gives access, you can always shorten it to the door. We've also got things like okay. In terms of quotes that disagree, so we're looking at maybe a Quaker view, or we're looking at things other than sacraments that help you feel closer to God. Our Quaker one is An inward spiritual experience. So what Quakers are saying, it's from the Quaker General Council, they say, for Quakers, sacraments are understood as an inward spiritual experience. So there's nothing on the outside. It's all about what's going on the inside. And then the last quotation that I'm going to put on here that I'm going to use in my conclusion, I think, is from Jesus. And he basically says that anytime Christians are together, he is with them. And he says this. Okay, so what he's saying is you wouldn't need any sacraments because Jesus is always there when you are talking about him. So I think that's enough to get us a decent answer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to number these, and then when we do the plan, rather than write out the whole quote, I'm going to just write down the number that it matches with. So going up to the plan, we're going to say, and let me just go over the question again for you to make sure that we're feeling confident we know what it's asking. Are sacraments, like Holy Communion and baptism, the best way to feel close to God, or are there better ways to feel close to God? And I know when some people have answered this question before, they've talked about how pilgrimage may be better and how personal prayer may be better. They are both valid points. For this answer, though, I'm not going to cover them unless when I'm drafting them, it seems to fit. You might not know this, but I tend to draft these and let the ideas just come, let the Holy Spirit just give me the ideas as I'm drafting them. So there are lots and lots of ideas that you could put for this, an infinite number of ideas about the best way to feel close to God in terms of putting the disagree. There's a lot for agree for the Catholics. Catholics overall would say yes. So let's have a little look if we can put a plan together. So my first point, Catholics say yes, as in the Bible, Jesus instructs, I put us, but I've crossed out us because not everybody writing this answer is going to be Catholic, instructs them to celebrate them, e.g. the Last Supper, and then you do this in memory of me, quote 3. Now, what's not clear here is how that gets your closeness to God. So this is another example of where something just pops into my head. So quite a lot in that first paragraph there, just in terms of a plan, but we'll try and unpick it a little bit later so I can make it clear how you would make that into something that would get you to a band 3. Catholics would say yes, as in the Bible. Jesus instructs them to celebrate the BG at the Last Supper. He's saying they have to celebrate it, follow his command. Jesus is the Son of God, and the Bible also says, I and the Father are one. By following the command, you get close to God. So just making sure that I actually answer the question there. In terms of our disagree, we're going to say not all Christians celebrate all sacraments. Most only do Eucharist and baptism. You can pull out 2 quotes here, or 2 ideas here. Jesus got baptized. And then also, again, we can use the same quotation, but this time we're using it for a disagree. We don't need to do that. Sorry, I was going off on something irrelevant there. So not all Christians celebrate all sacraments. Most only do Eucharist and baptism because Jesus says it and because Jesus did it. Quakers, distraction. I'm going to say quote 4. Okay? And then actually, for our conclusion, we're going to use our quotation 5 and say that sacraments overall aren't needed. And the reason why is this. We can get away with that because we should actually, in terms of Catholic teaching, be arguing, yes, the sacraments are the best way to feel close to God. But it doesn't specify that you're just giving the Catholic view. It's asking you to look at Catholics and Christians. And so if we use our knowledge of the Bible and try and stick to those quotes that we can use for more than one topic, it means that we can still get a really good mark, but maybe not give the view that was predominantly Catholic, which the sacraments is the best way. If it said something like, for Catholics, the sacraments are the best way to feel close to God, or the sacraments are the best way for Catholics to develop a relationship with God, then we wouldn't be able to do that. We would need to focus more on the agree side, because that is what Catholics would believe. Hope that makes sense as to why we are, what I'm trying to say to you. We're using a point here that's not, it is a Catholic view, but most Catholics would argue this. So in terms of doing a conclusion, you have to make sure that whatever you're arguing is which side is the strongest or what you have the most evidence for. So let's have a little look at trying to draft this and put it into some sort of essay type format. I'm going to use a couple of different pens just to try and show you the structure. So obviously you don't have to do PEE, you don't have to do PEAL, you don't have to do Peaswell or any of those things. If you want, you can do what, how, why, paragraphs like you do in English. All I'm going to do is show you that there is some evidence, there's some points, and that you always need to do this evaluation of how strong your point is in order to get to band 3. So just one little point here, Catholics are likely to argue. What that's giving you is an ability to say, but maybe not all Catholics. We're not an amorphous group. We don't all believe exactly the same things in exactly the same way. So I'm saying Catholics are likely to argue. I'm just going to look at the plan again before we start to write. So Jesus talks about celebrating sacraments, for example, in the Last Supper, and we've got this bit about following his command. And I'm going to use the word institutes because that is the correct word rather than introduces or invents. So it is institutes. Informally, in your head, you can be saying that he invents it or he introduces it, but that's not the correct term. Jesus institutes. Please remember when I'm drafting this, I'm not expecting you to be able to write this off the top of your head. Obviously, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to have these things a little bit quicker in my brain than you. All I'm trying to do is show you you don't have to do PEE. If it comes and it makes sense, and if something flows, if something pops into your brain, don't not use it because you think, oh well, I've got to do another sentence or I've got to do this many words. So let me read what I've put for the evidence. You can see this is my point. And this is my evidence. For example, at the Last Supper, Jesus institutes the Eucharist and says, "Do this in memory of me." He is saying they must do it as his followers. Today it is seen as the most holy of the sacraments, the source and summit of the Christian life. In fact, Catholics even pray in front of the Eucharist, adoration, to try and strengthen their relationship with God. So I'm bringing in a bit of the stuff from popular piety and prayer there. What we need to do now is to say whether this is a strong point or a weak point. And because we know that Catholics overall are going to say that sacraments are the best way to show a good relationship with God, I'm going to go down the line of grace. So, this idea is strong, as Catholics are encouraged to celebrate as many sacraments as they can in order to receive grace and later achieve salvation. That's not right. UCAT says, grace is God's free, loving gift to us and it helps strengthen the bond with God. So, all I'm doing is making sure in that sort of mini evaluation there, I'm saying if there's a lot of evidence for it, which there is, but I'm also making sure that I'm actually answering the question, because the question is not about sacraments, it's about sacraments being helping you get close to God. And obviously I'm saying here that they do, because you get grace, and grace is the thing that, you know, it shows that God loves you. It shows that you sort of, you know, you're receiving God's blessing. So that must be a sign that the relationship is strong. We're now going to go on to our disagree. Just to give you an idea, this looks really, really long. You don't need to do every paragraph like this. This is about a third of what you need to write, I would say. So we're going to go on to our disagree now. So, not all Christians would agree, with most only celebrating two. All Christians get baptised due to Jesus himself doing this, and Protestants such as Anglicans celebrate Eucharist because Jesus commanded it at the Last Supper. However, they do not believe it is Jesus' body. Now, that's not really that relevant now, come to look at it again, because the question is saying, does it help you feel close to God? So I kind of feel like, in some ways, now I'm looking at it again, that might not be that relevant, because what I really want to say is that some people, some types of Christians would say they're totally irrelevant, really, they're a distraction. So let's go for that point now, and it's this point here that we put on our plan. So we're going to kind of zoom this one like you would in English by zooming in, particularly looking at the word inward. Now it's going to be fairly difficult to evaluate this because we don't want to give away our other point that we were going to use here. So thinking about the fact that up here we talked about adoration, this is an idea that we could pull through down here and actually be aiming for like a band 3, top band 3 answer going into band 4, because in order to get the top bands you need to show kind of a thread going the whole way through it. So let's take this idea of adoration, because it does link very much with what the Quakers are saying here. This is actually echoed by the silent prayer used in adoration to an extent. No words or actions are needed, just silence to get close to God. That's actually taking an idea that we said was for the idea that sacraments were important, because the Holy Communion, remember, adoration is the thing that is when you take Holy Communion, you put it into a monstrance and then you have silent prayer in front of it. And what we're doing is we're comparing it to the Quaker view of sacraments, which is that they're internal, not external. So that's a really nice way to be pushing ourselves up to band 3. We're now going to do a fairly simple conclusion in comparison to this. One thing I do want to say about this year 11 and 10 is that there's very little of this that is only part of this topic of sacraments. So the quotations that I've tried to use, you can use for lots of different things. So do this in memory of me. You're going to be able to use that for liturgical worship. You're going to be able to use that for Paschal mystery. You're going to be able to use it for lots and lots of things, because it's one of the key things that Jesus says. The Quaker one, yeah, that is right. The Quaker one, you probably are only ever going to be able to use that on sacraments. But none of the other ideas that we've used here is really just specific. So don't look at this and go, oh God, I've got so much to learn. What we're trying to do on these 5-point plans is always trying to use some key quotations that you can use across the course. So this one, yes, this one, yes, this one, yes, and definitely this one. So let's try and draft our conclusion. And remember, I said that even though most Catholics are going to say sacraments are the most important, we were going to argue against it, because we're going to take the Christian view, general Christian view, just because it's easier. So overall, whilst most Catholics would agree, referring back to Scripture, Jesus himself seems to suggest that he will be with his followers when they are together. And I've put seems to suggest because with lots of things in RE, you can't really say, yeah, this proves this and that proves that, because it's just not true. Now, this is quite a long quotation as well, and it only makes sense if you put the whole thing. And again, we need to just quickly do a little bit of evaluation just to show that we have thought about either side. Remember your conclusion, it does say a justified conclusion. So you can't just say, overall, I think this. You've got to say why you think that. So I'm just thinking about this idea of baptism. Maybe that's the thing that we should use for our evaluation. So a little bit made up, but there we go. That being said, given that almost all Christians get baptised as Jesus did himself, perhaps that is the key to feel close to God, as why else would he have done it? Question mark. It also removes the original sin, which is necessary for salvation, which is the ultimate closeness to God, to be with him in heaven. I hope that's helpful. It does seem really long, and no one is expecting you to be able to produce this right now, this minute. But it may be that there's some ideas in there that stick for you. It may be that there's some bits in there that you didn't know or you weren't sure of. But it also might be that you can see now you don't need to do lots and lots of paragraphs. Some longer paragraphs and do less of them may be more useful to you. Hope that's helpful.